Melissa DeHart here, and welcome to the Coaching Studio. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Meg Mann. She is an MCC with the ICF. She is an American coach based in Europe, and she's been there since 1994. Meg began her career as an attorney and over time shifted gears into the development and delivery of managerial leadership programs across Central Europe and Russia. Meg accidentally fell into executive education and coaching and began her journey as an executive coach, coach trainer, and experienced facilitator. Her diverse experience includes long-term transformational leadership programs and global leaders in management consulting for many multinational companies. Meg has worked with executives from more than 70 different countries. She spends a considerable time training and mentoring coaches to become credentialed with the International Coach Federation. And again, she's credentialed as a master certified coach with the ICF. She's also been a coach trainer and supervisor in several accredited coaching training programs. Last but not least, she's fluent in English and Portuguese. She's also conversant in Spanish, Italian, and French, literally 4 languages more than I can speak. Meg has lived in 6 countries on 3 continents and currently resides with her husband in Portugal. Thank you, Meg, so much for being on the Coaching Studio.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's wonderful to connect with someone from beautiful Bainbridge Island.
Yes, well, thank you. Yeah. It's lovely to connect with somebody in Portugal. And I love that we can do this, right? You know, just be across the world from each other.
Yeah, it's great. And we have mutual friends who connect us, and that makes it even more special. So thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's networking on a bigger scale for sure. It's really fun. Yeah. So, you know, I loved this idea that you accidentally fell into coaching. So this really leads me into, how does one accidentally become a coach?
Yeah, well, I could say you're in the right place at the right time. So if you back up to when we first came to Europe, you mentioned 1994. My husband and I went to a small country called Slovakia right after it split from the Czech Republic. So it was Czechoslovakia and it split. And we went as volunteers. So we were there with the idea that we'd have an adventure and we'd see how long the adventure lasts. And worst case scenario, we go back to the States and I go back to practicing law and we'll see what happens. And here we are still in Europe 27 years later. But while in Slovakia, I got introduced to the managing partner of one of the global accounting firms, and he was Dutch, also a lawyer, and he was like complaining, maybe, I don't know, talking about his challenges. Let me put it that way. Talking about his challenges of having this really well-educated group of accountants and lawyers, well-trained technically, but they were a disaster when it came to the sort of the soft skills, dealing with clients, managing teams, leading and understanding about business and communicating with their Western clients who were moving more and more into Eastern Europe at that time. So he said, he just kind of said, hey, why don't we design and deliver a program to teach them these skills? You know that you managed a law firm and, you know, why not? And I kind of went, hey, that's cool. And it sparked something in me that was a sense of, again, adventure, creativity. He gave me carte blanche pretty much of, I mean, I had resources to their global human resource people, which was helpful, but pretty much said, this is what I need. You design it. I'll sign off and I'll correct you. And if you've got something wrong there. So we worked together, partnered together to create this program. And part of the program was a one-on-one, was several one-on-one sessions with the participants. This program was designed to go over 3 months, cover a lot of the managerial and leadership skills. And I was the person who was going to be taking them through the one-on-ones, setting their goals, finding out what the challenges were, what got in the way, kind of checking on progress and et cetera. Well, this was 1995 when we started this. It spread for all these other countries. And they started bringing in people from the Nordic countries. We went to spend several summers in Russia and in Poland and, flying all over. It was exciting work. And every single one of these programs included one-on-one. Well, fast forward, that program ran for a good 7 years. Fast forward, I'm living in Brussels, and my husband and I went there to get our MBAs, again, just for fun. And as I finished my MBA, I met a neighbor who worked for a very large consultancy company, and she knew about this program that I used to be involved in. And she said, the firm that does our leadership development work is looking for more faculty members, for facilitators. Why don't you apply? So she put me in touch with the person. I interviewed. During that interview, the woman said, "Oh, this is great. You've got a perfect background. Your background as a lawyer, your background doing this leadership and management development, and you've been coaching too. That's great, because we've got another project where we need coaches." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Well, yeah, you've been doing coaching as part of the program." I said, "I don't know if I have or haven't." This was, I think, 2001. And coaching had not been wasn't on my radar. Okay.
Yeah.
And in Eastern Europe and Russia and those countries, it wasn't on the radar so much then either. So she said, "Well, yeah, this is what coaching is." And she herself was a credentialed coach. So she started explaining it, and she said, "And we have a training program ourselves to train in some of our assessments and methodologies and such. And we would certainly put you through that." But she said, "You've already got the skills and the experience doing it." So I immediately went home after this interview, researching. It's like, what the is coaching? And so, of course, International Coach Federation, at that time it was called International Coach Federation. It's now International Coaching Federation. Anyway, ICF came up, and I thought, when I was practicing law, I had to go to law school, as a doctorate in law, had to pass a bar exam, et cetera. I'm not just going to hang a shingle out and say I'm a coach without a lot more training than the short training they were going to give me. So I started researching credentialing programs, those that were accredited by ICF, and finally found one that was a good fit. And that launched my career. But it was an accident. I mean, it was just, I didn't go seeking it as a profession. And there weren't that many programs out there at that time either, early 2000s. If you think about it, our profession has mushroomed in the last 20 years. The niches that are available now are just, and the sky's the limit. It's marvelous. In fact, in some ways, it's probably daunting. I think if I were to start that search now, I'd be like in overwhelm. Anyway, so it fell in my lap. And it was something that sparked a passion in me that I wasn't sure was there. And I've heard other people various people say that most of us who are in coaching probably have been doing this kind of thing most of our lives. You look back, you were the one that your friends came to. It wasn't just for advice, but just kind of be the sounding board and, the one who sort of provoked some deeper thinking in them. And I think that's true for most of us. We kind of had that stream.
Yeah, several questions that really sort of bubble to the surface as you're talking. One of them has to do with really this sense of the value of credentialing and the fact that you didn't want to just get a credential from anybody, but actually went out and looked for a place to get a credential. And you mentioned your JD and then, your bar accreditation, or you passed your bar exam, so you're legally a lawyer. And I think you bring up a really interesting idea too, which is that the coaching industry has just exponentially blown up, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
people do have so many choices. And in some ways, when you had 10 choices, it was easier than when you have a
Yes.
thousand different choices. But really,
Right.
I mean, what would you say to a new a coach who feels the very much like what you were saying at the end? You know, all my friends come to me. I've been doing this is just who I am. This is the water I swim in. This is just my nature
Mhm.
to be coach like. I don't really need a coaching certification because I already do this just naturally. Given your
Mm.
background and sort of what you brought up, what would you say to someone along that lines?
I would say build on that passion, build on the love you have for those kinds of conversations, and be open to learning more. One of the things, again, that I love about this profession is that you meet. I think I'm trying to think if I've ever met a coach who wasn't a life learner, and I can't. Nobody comes to mind. It's you're just immersed in life learning, and
Mhm.
we embark on this path. So I would just invite them to say, be open to all the learning that you
Yeah.
can have, and cherish every bit of it, because it's ongoing. I don't think it ever stops.
Yeah.
Um, that's that's a and for the most part, the people you're with are, as I say, they're life learners, and they're positive and passionate about it. And I contrast the very first ICF conference I went to versus all the bar association. And I was a trial attorney for 15 years. I went a lot to American Trial Lawyers Association meetings and things, and the contrast is just so great. I wish I'd captured pictures of those two. To
I
see
almost have
it.
a visuals of this sort of stiff, everybody's very professional, everybody wants to be smarter than each other. And then I've
Yeah.
experienced, you know, everybody just having a good time and trying to be present and in the moment with each other.
Yes, yeah. Well, and just in general, just a baseline level of happiness,
Yes.
right?
You know,
It's like
it,
lawyers kind of complain. So getting back to your thing about that, I think that the place to start is coming in and saying, what can I learn? Be the sponge. What
yeah.
can I learn? How can I continue to up my game, to fine tune and expand not only my toolbox, but deepen my own personal journey? Because that's the other difference about coaching and the path to credentialing, um, and more training, is it's really such a gift, because we're really, yes, it's nice that we're having these conversations with our clients and helping them, but at the end of the day, it's so much about our own personal journey.
Yeah. Well, and
It really is. It
I
really
really
is.
also see that MCC journey as the sort of the journey of the person, because to become an
Yeah.
MCC, you're learning to let go of all that
Yes.
expertise that you show up with, which is a
Yes.
kind of a deconstruction so that you can be fully partnered with another
Absolutely.
person, right? And it's quite an interesting experience. You know,
I
you and
think you're
I had
using the,
chat.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Yeah, no, I
No,
was just
you,
gonna
no,
say, I think
you.
we could do this all day. Um, and I just wanted to build on what you said, that you're right. You let go of things, and yet at the same time, I find, sort of building on this analogy of the toolbox, you're using the tools perhaps in different ways.
Yes.
You're grasping them in a different way. It feels different. It may look different, and
Mm.
some you do let go of. You say, well, that model just not going to work here
Right.
in this conversation. Um, so it's a different thing, and that's probably what mastery is in many of the arts
Mhm.
and sciences, isn't it?
I
Anyway.
think it's that willingness to let go and be curious and
Yes.
not know the answer. And I don't mean
Mm.
that you know, I really appreciate your bringing that more out in the open. I don't mean that you let go of everything that you know and you show up as sort of a, you know, blank slate with your clients, but you use what you know to inform your curiosity, but it's asking
Mm.
questions that you don't know the answer to versus leading
Yes.
your clients to a particular outcome. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I know when you and I were chatting before, one of the things that I'm just so impressed with is the level of diversity that you've worked with, because you've worked across the globe so much. And I'm really interested in sort of your experience of how coaching works with diverse perspectives or
Mm,
with diverse cultures. Like, what have you learned as you've gone through your adventure in the,
yeah,
and having that opportunity of working with so many different people from so many different places?
yeah. It's a great question. I I will say that um, coach the coach training works so well for me to become a better facilitator, because as a facilitator in leadership, we are pulling from the participants. We're drawing on their strengths. We're leveraging their expertise and their wisdom, which is really what MCC level or masterful coaching is about. You don't have to be at an MCC to do it. Please, let's make that
Yeah.
clear.
You could
I've
be an
seen some,
ACC and do it. Exactly.
you,
Or not even
you
have a
can,
coaching. Right.
exactly. I've had some people in training programs and they're there at the get-go, and I'm almost like, just stay there, snapshot. Anyway, it's building on what you mentioned a moment ago, is this idea of coming with the curiosity, coming with an openness, and coming with the what we do know as coaches is that there's some wisdom in there, and that wisdom of that person can be leveraged, and that the wisdom in the other person can be drawn out to build on that, or to see where all of these things are. So what served me well with this broader thing of diversity and dealing with people from so many different cultures, and then you get the levels of languages on top of that.
Mhm.
But I can't coming with that, exactly what you talked about, that we learn and stress so much in the MCC journey: curiosity, be willing to not know,
Yeah.
just be in that sense of openness and say, hey, I'll give you an example. For the first time, I was on a program in Singapore, and I was coaching, doing one-on-one with one of the leaders who was he was from mainland China, but had spent quite a few years in the US, was educated in the US. So, but I asked, it just didn't, one of those questions, so what do you think? And he sat back for a moment. He said, may I share something with you, but of cultural differences? I said, please do. And he said, we Chinese don't like to be asked, what do you think? And I'm thinking, this guy had been trained as a medical doctor, by the way, so very analytical. I'm very analytical. I'm a clear off the chart preference of T and MBTI. So it's my default question. What do you think? What do you think? But he said, it really puts us on the spot to say, because then we're under the pressure that we have to know all of the answer. And that's not my intention, right? My intention is, so what's bubbling up for you kind of question. But his cultural lens was, that question would put people off. And I looked at him and I said, thank you so much for that gift of sharing with me a tiny little thing. So I said, so what would be an appropriate question? And he said, you can ask me how I feel about it. And I went, oh. And so I thought, this is a learning thing for me.
This is going to be hard.
I said, I'm trained as a lawyer. Don't ask me to say that F word. It was, I said, I had a coach trainer who said that all the time, but I struggle with that F word. And we had a wonderful laugh about that. And I said, I don't want to take up your coaching session with you coaching me, but boy. So anyway, it was that openness that you talk about, that willingness to be vulnerable, that showing up and saying, hey, I may get this wrong, but work with me here. And the other thing one of the things I do is, I'm really passionate about where we put our energy and managing our own energy budget. So one of the other things I've learned is to go into every interaction where I've got mixed cultures, and even if it's an American who was raised similarly to myself, I'm going to go in not with this. I'm going to go in with this part of me, and I just set an intention.
I want the people
Yeah,
listening to hear you putting your hands around your head. And I believe
yeah,
you were the walking head at one
yeah.
point also, right? Like
Yes,
that image really stuck with me. And I think that's where a lot of us
the walk.
stay.
We
But we have
do.
so many assumptions that come out of our little
Yeah,
walking head that
yeah,
I'm hearing you're really inviting yourself to be curious about, and even more importantly, inviting your client to direct you and empowering your client to voice what their needs are. And the idea
absolutely.
that your bias towards thinking, somebody else probably has a bias towards feeling using that
Right.
language, and maybe even just the neutralization of the language so that people can have
Yeah,
anything show up that's appropriate for
right,
them.
right. So where I am now, after so many years of this learning journey, is set an intention to connect heart to heart. Set
Yeah.
a connection to, at the end of the day, I'm interacting with human beings and they're interacting with me as a human being. And start from there and be open, be vulnerable, be willing. The other thing I've learned, which was very different. Well, I shouldn't say that. It wasn't very different than when I practiced law as a trial lawyer, actually. It's just using it in a different way. But I have also learned that the less I say, the better. So I can cut it down to like, you know, a powerful question may be, and so, or yeah,
And I think that's so key also, Maggie, because I too taught to students, and this idea of powerful questioning or evocative questions
yeah,
or
right.
provocative questions, they seem so big and complicated. Like they've really got to be complex in order to be really evocative. And they're really just confusing if they're that way. Like the
Absolutely.
more simple, the cleaner, the more concise, the
Yes.
more the client gets to create their own meaning. And I love that you bring that up, which I think
Yeah.
really speaks to the cultural competence that you're talking about also, because you're not taking, to your point, you and I might have both, we didn't, but let's just say we both grew up in, I don't know, Arkansas or someplace, right?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
Florida
Right.
or Texas or wherever,
Right.
California. It doesn't, and we might have even grown up in the same family, and it doesn't even mean that we're going to have every single thing be the same way of
Yes.
thinking, feeling, and
Yes.
experiencing the world.
Yeah. And I think that actually that's a gift. It's something I've brought into my mentoring and training over the years as well. It's been interesting because I was actually involved in an ACTP program here in Portugal, and I was one of the examiners, and they are, of course, speaking Portuguese. And it's interesting because I was not Portuguese. Portuguese is not my native language, but the client would be talking da, 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 and say to the coach, "You know what I mean?" And the coach would go, "Yeah." And because it was not said in my native language, I heard it in a different way and I observed it in a different way. And the coach automatically said yes. And I
Mm.
reflected back on how many times in my own language the client may have said, "So you know what I mean?" And I say, "Yes." I know what that word means in my framework, my
Yes.
definition, my lexicon. Do I
Yes.
really know what the client means by it? So that was a huge light bulb for me of going, and I would call the Portuguese coaches out on it. I'd say, "Hey, before you go, then when we're doing skills practice, I'd call a timeout and say, hang on a minute. Do you really know what the client means by that?" And they said, "Well, yeah, she said such and such." I said, "I know you know the word.
Right.
Do you understand? Do you fully get?"
The
Because
importance of this for that
right,
client. Yeah.
are you paying attention to the energy, what the shifts in energy or the passion with which she said that word, or how
Yeah.
it contradicts what she just said 5 minutes earlier, or are you picking up on the nuanced things? And it's so easy for us
Mhm.
to, like you said, we can be from exactly the same place, have exactly the same background, but what you mean by a word does not necessarily mean, or a phrase, or a metaphor. And so that again was one of those, I thought, wow, this is a powerful teaching moment for me,
Right.
learning moment, I should say, a learning moment. to monitor that. And again, stay in that place of absolute curiosity. And I got to where I would, if a client said that to me, well, you know what I mean? It's this, it's such and such, you know how these kinds of things go. And I say, well, I may know from my own experience. I don't know that I know from yours. What's
Mhm.
important about that for you? Or what does that phrase signify for you?
Mhm.
I turn it back. And so the, there's been some real blessings of working back to your original questions about the diversity. I've learned and grown so much in my own coaching skills and my facilitation skills by having some of those humbling moments or those
Those
experiences
internal
that kind of
ahas,
contrast.
right? Those
Yes.
internal
Yeah.
ahas. And I think that's the gift of being a coach is the same thing with our clients. Our clients have an epiphany about something if we're able to hold
Mm-hmm.
that space.
Right.
And
Right.
we get the benefit of the epiphany because then we can like
Yeah.
mold it into our own experience and be like, where might this be showing up in my world also, right? Like it isn't a I'm an expert and you're some sort of neophyte who needs a lot of,
Right.
caretaking, but rather I have as much to learn from you as you have to learn from me. And it's a
Oh,
shared
yeah.
experience. I love that
Oh,
though. I really love that sense of, and I think this is really at the heart of a lot of diversity conversations and cultural competency as a coach is this recognition that we make assumptions all the
mm,
time and that
all the
we
time.
really have to acknowledge our assumptions and be curious instead and
Yeah.
recognize the easy places. Because to your point, how many times have each of us had somebody say, you know what I mean? And we go, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Sure.
And I remember having a coaching session and the client said, you know what I mean? And I don't know where this came from. It was in the moment, but I said, I'm not sure it matters if I know what you mean. Do you know
Yeah.
what you
Great.
mean? Right?
Yeah,
This
great
is
response. Great response. Say it's not about my understanding, it's about your understanding. Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and I think it's that letting go of our ideas about what things mean so that we can really have the client be the meaning maker. It's just
Yeah.
beautiful,
Yeah. And
Well,
and recognizing that we can fall into these patterns and it gives us this beautiful opportunity, as you say, to be on a journey of challenging our assumptions, looking at our beliefs from sort of a 360 or kind of go, wow, what was that about? You know,
yeah.
um, what
It's
just
almost like
happened?
the blind man and the elephant, right? Like, but it's like taking your
Yes.
turn walking around the elephant versus assuming this is the only side that there is.
Yeah, yeah.
That's wonderful. That's just, but I think it is, I mean, I think it is one of the things that's so important as people, especially if people do decide they want to become a professional coach, that they understand that this is part of the journey is the inside journey that we take as a human being also to be curious with ourselves about those assumptions and
Yes.
an automatic,
Yeah.
you know, automatic whatevers that we come up with.
Well, and even teaching for those of us who've done training programs or facilitated programs for leaders to
Mhm.
um, give them the coaching skills. That alone, that putting aside some of the assumptions, challenging some of these things, exploring more with their team members, all of that is so helpful. And I'm reminded of talking with some of the early pioneers of our profession. And and they said, we had no idea that it was going to become this great profession. What we wanted to do was shift the way we converse with each other, start
Mhm.
shifting mindsets. And I love the fact that coaching has become ubiquitous in other professions. Because again, if we're not everybody has to be a professional coach to come at conversations with this more open mind and the
Yeah.
curiosity and come as a learner.
Well,
Um,
and you work in organizations a lot with a lot of leaders. I mean, what opens up for leaders when they come to not as coach, but with a coaching mindset or a coaching curiosity perspective or perspective of inquiry? Like, how does that shift trust and safety on the team? How does that change and shift buy-in that
Mm.
your stakeholders, your team members, your customers, like how does that shift everything when a leader can bring this forward? What do you notice?
Well, I think that first of all is not even first. I don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg. But one of the things that I think deepens the trust is the willingness to be vulnerable. And I don't know how familiar you are with the Trusted Advisor book. It's been around now for probably 20 years. And in that book, Meisner Green, I always forget the third author. I'm so sorry. The third,
We'll put it in
to
the
the
link
third author.
below.
Yeah, but it's called The Trusted Advisor. And in that book, they have this. They've broken down trust by an equation. All right, and so the equation of that, it's fascinating to look at. It's to disaggregate what trust really is. And what they have is trust made up of credibility.
Mhm.
So, you've got the credentials, you've got the expertise and experience. Reliability. You do what you say you're going to do, you show up on time, you deliver, all of those things. And then in that numerator, there's the idea of intimacy, what they call intimacy. So this connection, this human to human connection, which includes that willingness to be vulnerable. Those are in the numerator. All of that is divided by self-focus. So the premise of that is if I reduce my self-focus, it's not about me, and I increase my intimacy, reliability, and credibility, I'm going to deepen the trust.
Mm.
And we use that a lot in our leadership programs. It's just so powerful. And again, giving the leaders permission to set aside ego, giving them permission to deepen a relationship and connect human to human is really huge, because most of them have credibility, most of them are reliable. But where they struggle is in that intimacy space and taking it off their own agenda, because they're under pressure as well, right? And once they begin to do that and work with it, and they realize, hey, I'm getting far better results, and I'm getting them faster, and I'm getting a more motivated team, then it fosters even more of that willingness to be open and vulnerable and explore. So that intimacy piece on that is a great way to approach with leaders, and it opens up to much of what we talk about and do as coaches.
Yeah.
Creating that trust-based relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a powerful thing. Long answer to your short question.
But it's wonderful, because I think, it's such a brilliant resource, and how we are thinking about, again, how does our knowledge inform our curiosity with our clients so that they have the capacity to have this awareness that shows up for them, where they're really good here, they're really good here, but here's this place between them and the other person that maybe there's something to work on.
Yeah.
What is one of the biggest misconceptions about coaching that you see?
Probably that we're advisors. I think that despite the fact that coaching has really been spread out through a lot of organizations around the globe, I still think there's a sense of, well, the two things. One is I'm just going to go talk to the coach, and they're going to tell me what, give me gems of wisdom, or, help me with my to-do list by telling me what to do, which we know is not the case. They don't realize how much they're going to be involved in the journey. And I think there's also some reluctance on some people's part of, because coaching was used for the longest time in performance coaching. So it's sort of, what did I do wrong? Or, how am I being judged by the organization? And one more standard by which I'm going to be evaluated. That's kind of what I see. I don't know. What's been your experience?
I agree with you. I think this idea that this is going to be like a trusted advisor or a mentor that's going to tell me what to do. And I see it as the biggest sort of the
Mhm.
seduction of expertise, right? Where
Yes,
the client
yes.
comes to us and is like, I would love to have your thoughts on X issue. And the
Yeah.
coach just can't help themselves because they've got some. And so, like, how do we step out of that seduction? And how do we also, a lot of times, and I'd be really curious how you handle this also, but for me, I just sort of giggle when people ask me my opinion. Not that I'm not willing to share my opinion at times, but I think I'll often say something to the effect of, let's have a thorough conversation about this first. And if there's any gaping holes, I promise you, I'll share with
Right.
you something
Yeah.
that I might have
Yes.
noticed that you didn't land on. But I'll be honest with you, Meg, I think out of like most of my conversations, I don't have like hard numbers on this, but I'm feeling like about 90% of them never need my opinion,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's
Like it
probably,
just,
yeah, yeah. And as much as our egos would like it not to be so, it's true.
it's probably higher. It's probably like
It's probably higher.
99.999% of them don't need
Yeah.
my opinion, which doesn't mean I
And
don't share perspectives or share an insight or an intuitive hit that I might be getting, but I don't do it with very much attachment either. Right.
right,
So I think there's that
right.
also. Well, let's throw this in the space and see what shows up, but not necessarily
Yeah.
I need to tell you what to do. So
Yeah. I think that's the hard part. That was the hardest part for me because I came from a profession where my clients did buy a piece of my brain, right? I
mhm.
mean, that's what I got paid for. So in my coach training, I always I'm a visual person. So I would imagine before I'd go in to the coaching thing, I'm unplugging. I got to unplug the problem solver part of my brain because it's not serving well here. And that was a huge challenge for me,
Yeah,
having
it's like you
come
have to
from a
let
career.
go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was paid to be an advisor. So that was an even bigger challenge. So so there were a couple of things that happened. One was I resisted the temptation. And so, like you say, kind of humor. I have a saying, I love to tell people what to do. Ask my husband, he'll tell you. I love to tell people what to do. But I'm not sure how useful that will be for you. And so let's hear from you first. And like you said, if I have something that hasn't been said, I may throw it out as an offer. And what's happened over the years is so humbling. What the client comes up with from their own resources and their own knowledge bank is far greater. And I've been blown away. Sometimes I'll be like, wow. A couple of times I'll say, wow, that is really good. Can I
I'm
take that on board?
totally
That's
stealing it. Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And so enough of those happen. It didn't take much. Two or three of those happen, and you kind of go, oh, wow, this is humbling
Mhm.
because what I would have offered pales in comparison to what they came up with. So that was number one.
Yeah.
Number two is, as you say, that it's coming up with a, a fun way of saying, yeah, I got lots of stuff. I love to give advice, but let's hear from you first.
Yeah.
And we'll see if, or I'll tell people, look, I'll give you lots of things to do, but how well do you respond when people,
Tell you what to do
from
about
yeah,
really
tell
big,
you what you
important
did?
things in your own
Yeah.
life.
How motivated is that going to make you? And after you've had you've built the trust, and they kind of go, a lot of my leaders are take charge direct people, right? And most of them do not like to be told what to do. So, and I said, are you going to be motivated if I tell you?
Yeah.
And they said, probably not. So challenge them a bit. I think
Yeah.
the second piece you mentioned, what was another tough one for me was letting go, not being attached to outcome, even if they come up with it. So wanting them to succeed in it,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, to get attached to what's going to happen with it, regardless of whether it's even my solution, right?
Right.
But get attached to the whole situation. That was another learning
Yeah.
of they need to go through their journey. Just like
Yeah.
my learning journey has not been a cakewalk all these years either.
Yeah.
They need to learn and experience. So the first is unplugging the problem solver. The second is to have a couple of things in your toolbox that are um, fun and light and sincere ways of inviting the wisdom from the client to emerge. And then really understand how important it is to not be latching on to some kind of outcome, regardless of who proposes it. Just let it unfold, see what's going to emerge, see what's there. Yeah, those are three more wisdom tidbits that we learn along the journey.
Yeah. And I'm really thinking also about, just as I'm listening, that attachment that we get to the outcome, even if it's not our outcome, right? Even if it's the client is completely at choice and it's their outcome they're moving towards. How do we then as coaches take care of ourselves so that our stuff doesn't lay on top of their stuff, right? Like, how do we keep that enmeshment clean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and how do you like take care of yourself as a coach so that you can show up with that more open, curious, neutral, non-attached perspective?
Yeah, and I'll ask you the same question because I'd love to learn from you as well. I mentioned earlier that the idea of setting an intention before, so I think that's key for me, is to recognize I'm coming in human to human. I'm big on the energy, as I mentioned earlier. So I do a series of energy exercises that really get me, doesn't take but a few minutes, but get me grounded and in that space of feeling open and at flow. And there's even a part of it that I'm sort of shaking off any of my stuff, just like clearing all of that. And you do figure eights, which is really great to clear any energy that's been there from earlier meetings or anything else that you're bringing in to the space. So consciously taking the time to clear energies and come in. And I can almost tap into my little, the kid at Christmas type of energy of can't wait to see what emerges. Now, I need, the danger of that is, I come in all, I got it. And my client may be having, maybe over here. So, modulating it a bit, but coming in with that anticipation of an excitement of what's going to emerge, that curiosity. And I don't know how much I did of that as a kid, but I certainly want to tap into it now as an adult.
Yeah.
So those are just a few of the strategies that, and I think it takes some time to realize that what we're doing when we show up as coaches is not about performance.
Right. It's about that presence.
It's about just, let me be fully present. And there are times in a session where they'll say something and I'll go off and I'll say, I'm sorry, that triggered something. Let me bring it back to you. And I'll just say, or I'll mess up something and I'll go, stop, take two.
Don't answer that question. What I really meant to ask was.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me, that transparency piece also, again.
Yeah. Rewind the tape, go back.
Yeah. And I really love this intentionality, because I think it's core to everything, right? Is the intentionality that we bring to it, and that sense of wanting to show up in an open, curious manner. And
Absolutely.
I tend to do laughter yoga as my way of getting there.
Cool.
I really like laughter yoga quite a bit. So I'll just be like,
absolutely.
I'll make myself laugh until I'm like, and then it just clears all that out of, like, any tension gets cleared out of my system. And then I'm just ready to be real with a person.
Well, there's one quote I'd like to share with you and your listeners and viewers, comes from the book by Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, called My Stroke of Insight. You're probably familiar, you're nodding, so you're familiar with her and her TED Talks, and that book is just brilliant. There was a line in that book when I read it that just jumped out at me. And it was about talking about her experience in the hospital and not being able to recognize and distinguish energies of people, not even her own mother. I mean, she couldn't distinguish that it was her mother, but what she could distinguish was the energy that her mother brought. Warm and caring and nurturing. And so the sentence that she has is, each of us is responsible for the energy we bring into a room. And it, like I said, it just jumped off the
Yeah.
page for me. And I went, holy cow. Wow.
I
Wow.
absolutely
Wow.
resonate with that. I absolutely resonate with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that is that intentionality, right? It's an
Yes.
energetic thing. I mean, it comes through physically, how we show up, whether we're, and to your point, energetically, if I want to just show up really real and present with another person, if they're low energy, I can match that. It doesn't mean I have to feel bad, but I can modulate myself to
Right.
be where my client is. And on the other hand, I also have to have my own base level of energetic health, right? And so
Yes.
that we're sort of intentional about our energetic signature, as I like to call it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you know, even just the question or repeating that phrase or asking yourself, what's the energy I'm bringing into this room?
Yeah.
And we're blessed as coaches to have the training and our competencies that talk about coaching mindset and coaching presence. You know, just reminding ourselves, I'm there just to hold this space.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm here to just hold this amazing sacred space for this client to explore. We're like explorers and discoverers on a treasure hunt. Let's see what's there. If that's the energy I bring, then that's the atmosphere that because that's what people pick up on. Before they pick up on our body language or what we say or the tone of voice or the content, they're going to pick up that vibration and that energy. So for me, that is absolutely critical. And if it's not there, take a moment, get yourself composed, go to the restroom, like I say, clear some energy, get yourself in that space.
Yeah.
And we teach that for leaders as well. I just think it's a real powerful tool for
changes
just about anybody.
Yeah, it changes
Yeah.
the narrative on every conversation you're ever going to have if you have intentionality about the energy you want to bring into it. I mean, that's beautiful. And so on that note, I'm curious, what are you up to in the world right now that you'd like to share with folks?
Oh gosh, I am in transition, actually. So it's kind of an exciting time. I'm granting myself the freedom to be in summer school and be open and a learner to some new things, because I have closed out, after more than a decade, I've closed out my MCC mentoring and my advanced coach mastery programs. Mm-hmm. I made that decision, and I'm lovingly passing and referring people on to some of my dear colleagues who continue to do that work. That was a big thing for me. And due to the global situation of the pandemic, a lot of the leadership facilitation, of course, just sort of stopped. So it gave me this open calendar for the summer to be exploring what's next. So I'm continuing with coach supervision. I've got some coaches that I am coaching, and I always love coaching coaches. Mm-hmm. But I'm just exploring, seeing what's going to come up, what's going to bubble up for me to create and embark on the next part of the journey.
Yeah, I can see that kid at Christmas. I can see that kid at Christmas.
Yeah, it feels kind of weird though, because for years it's like do. We talked about that, the walking, talking head of doing. And it's now like, oh, let me take it a little easier. And so I've had to set my intention of, I'm in summer school. Let's pretend we're in summer school and do some play and a little bit of reading and studying and see what comes up for the fall semester.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
It's exciting.
Those transitions are always exciting times. So
yes, yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. And
thank you, Lisa. It's been my pleasure. And I still didn't get all your advice though. So, and suggestions and brilliance.
Well, you'll just have to listen to the podcast, because I'm sure they're sprinkled throughout.
Next time we'll reverse it, and I'll be interviewing you.
There we go. There we go.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.